Welcome back to Margin. Are you a part of the Great Resignation? So some of the biggest news or new news of the last year that we've heard has been around a form of the Great Resignation. Now, this meaning that people are pursuing better work environments, more flexible schedules, better perks, or those that have young children at home that they need to care for, as well as entrepreneurs that want to go out and try something on their own. And all of these types of scenarios, people are seeking a respite, seeking a way of getting out. Now, looking for another option than returning to the post-pandemic corporate America, these people are looking at options, looking at their options, looking at how they can change how they view work going forward. To put this in perspective, over 20 million people quit their jobs in Q3 and Q4 of 2021 alone. Now, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics provided a breakdown of resignations as follows. Now, July of 2021 was 4,028,000. August of 2021 was 4,270,000. September was 4,362,000. And October was 4,157,000. Now, what was really surprising was November's number at 4,527,000. The latest data showing that 4.5 million people left their jobs in 1 month alone is pretty staggering. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have not had other times in history where we've had multiple millions of people leaving the workforce at once, but this number continues to grow in the recent months. Now, it's not the fact that someone has left their job that's the surprising aspect to me. What's more surprising is that there's almost an awakening of sorts amongst the workforce happening. Those who are seeking better arrangements to not just work for a living, but to work for a life. So I believe it's always important to be running to something instead of running from something. Now, this is not to encourage you to line up your next girlfriend or boyfriend before breaking up with your current girlfriend or boyfriend. What this means is that you don't look at your situation from a standpoint of just wanting to get out of where you're at without having an actual plan. So maybe you are amongst the almost 3/4 of Americans who actually hate their job. Now, that doesn't mean that you just quit that job and leave you and your family susceptible or in the lurches, but to figure out the next thing that you will be focused on and build a plan around that. Maybe it's applying, it's interviewing and locking in that new job. Maybe it's building up the funding for that new business or getting accepted into that school, but always having that next step, meaning that you actually have a plan. And of course, plans can change and your course can change accordingly. But as you've heard before, if you fail to plan, you will plan to fail. So work on pulling that boat up to the dock before jumping into the water and swimming out to that boat. This will give you the ability to really methodically think through and not respond based on emotion, and it will allow you to preemptively look at what you actually want out of life and orchestrate that accordingly. Now, we don't know exactly what those who are participating in the Great Resignation are going to do, but Inc. Cited the Wall Street Journal and other government data to boil down where these workers are going if they're not going to unemployment. Now, the Labor Department data shows that there are now 500,000 more unincorporated self-employed workers than there were at the start of the pandemic. At 9.44 million. The number of new applicants for federal tax ID numbers jumped 56% between 2019 and 2021. 2/3 of those were for businesses expected to employ nobody other than the founder. Now, the percentage of workers in the US who consider themselves self-employed rose from 5.4% in February 2020, just before the pandemic, to 5.9% now. So this gives us a little insight into what may be occurring for those who are resigning. They may be pursuing entrepreneurship endeavors based on that data, which is very important, being that it's the bedrock of America and our economy. An article on MSN, according to the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration, stated that small businesses make up 99.7% of U.S. employer firms and contributed to 64% of net new jobs. So many believe that it's the Fortune 500s that employ the greatest percentage of the population, but it's actually the self-employed and the small business owners who do this. An article called "Who is Driving the Great Recession" by Harvard Business Review found that employees between 30 and 45 years old have had the greatest increase in resignation rates, with an average increase of more than 20% between 2020 and 2021. While turnover is typically highest among younger employees, our study found that over the last year, resignations actually decreased for workers in the 20 to 25 age range, likely due to the combination of their greater financial uncertainty and reduced demand for entry-level workers. Interestingly, resignation rates also fell for those in the 60 to 70 age group, while employees in the 25 to 30 and 45 plus age groups experienced slightly higher resignation rates than in 2020. Now, the verdict is still out on all the potential causes, but the article continued by stating that many of these workers may have simply reached a breaking point after months and months of high workloads, hiring freezes, and other pressures, causing them to rethink their work and life goals. So what was surprising was that the article goes on to say that resignations are highest amongst tech and healthcare workers. And it quoted, "In general, we found that resignation rates were higher among employees who worked in fields that had experienced extreme increases in demand due to the pandemic, likely leading to increased workloads and burnout." Now, the recommendation to these employers who may have employees experiencing heightened levels of workload and resulting burnout was by, quote, "exploring metrics such as compensation, time between promotions, size of pay increases, tenure, performance, and training opportunities can help to identify trends and blind spots within your organization." In a LinkedIn article named "What is the Great Resignation?" they stated that there is a consensus that during the pandemic, people quit their jobs to find something more meaningful, connected with the working from anywhere culture, and that make sense for a new way of work-life balance. This meaning that work has become an increasingly growing aspect of concern, especially in the millennial generation. The culture today is much less focused on working from one company, climbing the proverbial company or corporate ladder, then retiring from the same field or even the same company. But instead, people are pushing for more meaning in what they do versus just simply being a cog in someone else's system, making someone else rich. So MIT posed a strong position for the correlation between healthy cultures and turnover in their article called "Toxic Culture is Driving the Great Resignation." Now, in this particular article, there was a study conducted of 170 cultural topics causing employee turnover. Now, narrowing those down to the top 5 areas, all 5 areas were compared to compensation in the likelihood of an employee leaving over being improperly compensated. Toxic corporate culture was 10.4 times more likely to cause attrition than compensation, followed by job insecurity and reorganization at 3.5%, high levels of innovation at 3.2%, and failure to recognize employee performance at 2.9%. Now, finally, the poor response to COVID-19 was the fifth and final reason overcompensation that people left companies at 1.8%. Now, the article continues stating that much of the media coverage of the Great Resignation focuses on high turnover among burned out knowledge workers who are dissatisfied with their stagnant wages. Based on their findings, they found that it is broadly consistent with this narrative. Industries that employ large numbers of professional and technical employees, like management consulting and enterprise software, have experienced high turnover. Now, we found, and this is their quote, we found indirect evidence that burnout may contribute to higher levels of attrition among companies that excel in innovation. It's worth noting, however, that our direct measures of burnout, workload, and work-life balance do not emerge as key predictors of industry-adjusted turnover. So all that said, think about you and your scenario. Where are you when it relates to this pendulum? Are you content where you are? Is the culture and purpose in your wheelhouse and what you anticipated? Or are you searching? Are you even burnt out at this point? Now, we spend the best hours of our day and the best years of our lives working. So think about where you are, what matters to you, and whether what you do actually aligns with your values. Now, this is not meant to communicate that we should all get up and quit our jobs because of the culture, because of the specific role that we hold in that company or in that place, or the lack of flexibility that company may have, or even the work-life balance not being met based on our expectations. But it does beg the question of whether you are spending your time in the right places. Now, remember, don't just run from something, run to something. If you are going to resign, don't do it because everyone else is doing it, but pull that yacht, that boat, or the paddleboard up to the pier and actually have a plan for your future. If this information is helpful to you, explore the Margin membership, where me and my team will help you take the information you're learning and apply it to your life and your finances. I've built an interactive course that allows me and my team to come alongside people like you to help you revamp your finances and build margin into your life. Click the link in the description below for more information.